Again, my name is Avik Batra. I'm a managing director with Accenture. I've been with the firm for about 15 years. And for those that don't know, just real quick, Accenture is a end-to-end consulting company. We have about 750,000 employees globally. We do strategy and consulting work, so helping businesses think through, year-over-year roadmap strategy, helping with change management. We have a technology business as well, where we help clients, think through how to implement technology, how to solve really complex, change programs and implement, and how technology can enable that. We also have an operations business where we will help operate some of our clients' functions. And then our fourth business line is Accenture Song, which is the largest creative design technology-enabled creative agency, and that's part of the business I fit into. So I am focused on helping improve the experience of our clients' clients, and I focus on state and local government. So that's my mandate. And one of the things as a part of that role is I'm helping clients think through on how to use generative AI as a part of their businesses and their organizations. So I was asked to provide a bit of a market trend or a market overview on how we're seeing generative AI shift with our clients. So Accenture targets the top 2,000 companies from a revenue perspective globally, and public service organizations. And we're having a lot of conversations across these industries, and it's been a very interesting time within Accenture as well as in the marketplace, right? If we think about ChatGPT in general, that got launched in November 2022, and OpenAI made the news very quickly. It is a large language model, and the cool thing that I think from an adoptability standpoint is that over 100 million people downloaded that application within 2 months. That is crazy adoption in terms of people using it, trying to figure out what it is. And artificial intelligence in general, right? It's been around since the 50s, and it started out in Dartmouth, and I forget the professor's name, but he wrote a white paper about it, and how AI could be used and how computers could be used to start AI. So since then, until November 2022, there's been different stages of how artificial intelligence has been used, but it's been very inaccessible, right? November 2022 comes around, it becomes very accessible, right? The masses are able to use this technology in their everyday life, and what we're seeing is that it's going to cause a very large, and I know this is a very difficult slide to see, but it's going to cause a very large disruption in a number of industries, right? Everywhere from banking to insurance to energy to retail to travel and to natural resource companies or utility companies, right? And what the key message to take away is, and what I've been trying to help articulate to clients and in forums like this, is that there's a shift happening in how in every way we are going to be working in the future, and how we're going to be using technology at home, and how we're going to be interacting in society. AI is going to be there. And I think we've reached an inflection point on, okay, how do we help these industries understand the disruptions that is going to occur in their own businesses, so they're ready for the future, right? And those are the types of conversations that we're having today. Similarly, across industries, there's going to be a disruption across job categories, right? And the one I like to point out, and I hope there's no lawyers in the room, but the legal profession is going to have 100% disruption with AI in the future. And both of these research, data points are from, Accenture research that's been done and supported through other, pieces of literature through Gartner, et cetera. And what the thing, again, I want to stress and have people understand is generative AI is going to fundamentally change how we work, right? And it's, the iPhone moment, right, as people are calling it, with there's a new piece of technology, but we don't really understand how it's been going to unlock value for companies, for society, and if you think about the evolution of the iPhone, there's been several upgrades over the years that enable new features, that enable new applications to be created to help, with a variety of things. Imagine a life now where you didn't have Uber or DoorDash or Uber Eats, right? Those are the types of things that are going to come out because of this technology being so accessible in the near future, hopefully. So I'm going to go through, and I've touched upon some of this already. I'm going to go through like a little bit about like how we're explaining how this technology can be used to clients, right? I know you guys are in AI days, probably studying AI and very familiar with this, but we as consultancies and professional services are helping clients understand this every day so they can figure out how to use it. And some of the content I'm going to show, is going to paint a picture on how we try to explain some of that. And, the category of artificial intelligence that we're, seeing gain popularity right now is the large language model. And this is not new technology, right? The large language model, before 2015, it was talked about, it was tried to, it was conceptualized, and, it was considered like, state-of-the-art type of technology. In 2015, around that time frame, Google introduced the concept of transformers in natural language processing, right? So it is how data sets are created from a foundational standpoint and how the data sets are used from an interpretation and comprehension standpoint. And Stanford also, at that same time, classified what Google was talking about as the large language model methodology. So the thing that, that I find is that Google kind of like tried to push this out, but they were doing it in a very reserved manner. Competitors like OpenAI decided to launch it quickly, right? So now you're seeing a lot of the big ecosystem players trying to catch up with each other, right? AWS launched Bedrock, which is a very similar product to OpenAI. So what we're seeing now is like over 450 startups are playing around or creating large language models to introduce to society. And I think personally what we're going to see is a consolidation of some of these companies into these larger ecosystem providers that exist out there, like the Salesforces, the AWS, the Microsofts, and the Googles. So what we saw in 2022 is how it became more accessible. It got cheaper, and it allowed for run to occur more efficiently. Some of the things that are happening now and in the future is like, how are these applications going to be created or used, right? And that's what I meant by the iPhone moment. Here's the technology, but we still don't fully understand how all of it's going to be unlocked and used in the future, right? There's a lot of use cases people are talking about. I think I'm going to walk you through some of these use cases now, but if we have this same talk next time this year, there's going to be things that we're going to be demoing and showcasing that we didn't even know, today, which is, kind of crazy if you think about it. So, if you think about it from a market perspective, Accenture talks to CEOs, they talk to government leaders, they talk to nonprofit leaders. Of the interviews we've done, of the surveys we've done, 98% of executives globally understand and believe that AI is going to change the way the organization needs to run, operate in the next 3 to 5 years. That's like, there hasn't been a movement like that ever, in my opinion, right? It took years for digital technologies to be adopted. It took years for cloud to be adopted. Now we're talking about 98% of, these leaders in our world agreeing that this type of technology is going to shift the way they operate. 6 in 10 organizations plan to use ChatGPT for learning purposes in this year, in 2023. And 4 out of 10 want to make a large investment. We as Accenture, so we have over 750,000 employees, we're investing $3 billion over the next 5 years to upskill our resources, to update our offerings, to making sure that we're relevant for our clients. Microsoft last year invested $10 billion and is planning to use that money over the next 5 years. That is the largest investment of all of the AI investments in the past 5 years combined. And the last thing I want to talk about is that, 40% of working hours across these industries, and I kind of showed you that in the previous diagrams, are going to be impacted with large language models. My 2 cents is, and we were talking about this earlier, if some of you were in that session, it's about adaptability. How are you guys going to adapt to use these technologies in the future in your day-to-day work, at home, and in society? This is another slide that we use often in terms of how to explain this, right? There's actually, today at least, 6 different major priority areas or use cases that we're seeing how generative AI models and applications will be used. One is text models, right? I think that's what ChatGPT is, and what most people are familiar with in terms of, how to use the technology. You ask a question, you can have a conversation with the model and hopefully get the answer that you want. There's going to be impact with that in marketing and sales, with general writing, with note-taking, right? The second major use case is code generation. So if you think about, IT organizations inside of big companies, a lot of time is spent on upkeeping those systems and making sure that they're, enabling the business and sustaining their business. Developers now, we have some data, and we are doing this even on client engagements now, is that, pieces of code that developers would take, a week to write can be prompted by a developer and have that code within 4 hours. And what the developer is doing is prompting for a function or a code to be written and just reviewing it and tweaking it, and it's becoming a jigsaw puzzle instead of, fresh write code, right? Which is pretty powerful. A couple other use cases that we're seeing from a priority area is image. So image creation. I'm sure some of you have heard about the DALL-E model that came out by OpenAI, but you can prompt these models now to say, hey, show me a bulldog sitting on the Clearwater beach wearing a red hat, and then you can prompt it to say, I want to see a blue hat, right? And the image is created right away from just prompting a model. Speech synthesis, which I think is going to be actually a huge game changer, and I don't know. To me, it doesn't feel like many people are talking about this particular use case. So, things around customer service, for example, when you call a contact center, a call center, or, chatting with someone at an organization you need help with, you have a Delta flight problem, right? These models now can interpret and understand what's happening in real time. And if a customer is frustrated, it can, sometimes you have IVR prompts when you call the call center and it starts asking you questions. If you sound frustrated, it can automatically put you into a queue that has a more experienced rep or has been there for a while. You're going to see that customer service change quickly, right? In terms of how organizations can now use these models to their advantage and making sure that you don't have to call multiple times to get help, right? So the other part of the speech synthesis piece is real-time language translation. I also think that's going to be a huge game changer in the near future. You talk about underserved populations, you talk about, traveling, for example. You will be able to call a contact center, call for help, speak your native tongue, and the recipient of that call doesn't need to speak that language. Because what's going to happen is it's going to auto-translate what's happening, so it can translate into Hindi, Spanish, whatever the language may be, and the recipient will respond in English and auto-translate, and the caller will hear their native tongue that they're more comfortable in. that is going to be an absolute game changer. So some other, potential use cases that we're seeing, especially in the 3D world, meta world, I think you're going to see a convergence of some of that, virtual reality, gaming type of world. And, from a gaming perspective, it would take, a lot of development to create those, games. And you're going to see AI models just like create, new game levels in real time while, people are playing it. So that's going to be an interesting scenario, as well as metaverse experiences. And then, the sixth domain is, the other domain, right? Like it's the catch-all, everything else, right? It's just because the technology is emerging. So as you are, as folks are seeing some of these developments and using these technologies, they're developing new applicability and applications to use this technology, hopefully for the good. So I'm going to show you a couple, use cases that we help, describe how this technology can be used for, I show up to client sites and literally show them this and how to unlock some of the value that they could do. So what you have right here, this is a picture of a person, and we recorded a script, and you're going to see the person just talking, and it wasn't a video, so there's no video production, there's no voice production, so you don't. And that's what I mean by job disruption, right? Is that like normally you would have hired a voice actor, normally you would have hired a videographer, all that kind of stuff. So what's happening is this technology is being created in a way that is accessible for folks that don't normally have these skills, but to prompt models to help them do what they're asking for. So what you're going to notice, and I have a couple examples, is this one's not that perfect, and let's talk about that.
Greg Cabrera, and I'm excited to talk with you about generative AI. Hey, look at this picture. Did you know that generative AI helped make this? Wow, that is so neat and so lifelike. That is so friggin' dope. Ha 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 ha.
So what did you guys notice about that? Sorry? Anything else? Yeah, so, well, I'm going to show you the next video, so let's hold on that. So what you see here, there's competition happening now with these models, right? And what you're seeing here is that not every model is perfect. It was clear from a video perspective, like if you had seen that video at home on the TV, you'd be like, this is not the real person, right? You could tell that right away. The beard wasn't moving, the lips looked a little fake, it sounded like a computer, it didn't say AI, it said I, right? So there's an element of, yes, this technology is here, it's unlocked, it's accessible, but would a company put this out there? I hope not, right? However, in my mind, this is the Corolla, but like, this is if you're using the right technology in the right way, you have people with the right skills using the technology, this is a product that can be created.
Intel team, thank you for your time today. Independent studies have discovered major performance improvements when using 5th generation Intel Xeon scalable processors for high-demand AI workloads in machine learning and data analysis. I look forward to saying more in the future.
So if we weren't in a generative AI session and I didn't preempt and tell you that this is a fake video and you saw this, I would have thought this was real. I would have thought that was a real actor. I would have thought that was a real voice. I would have thought that person was actually speaking that, but it's pretty damn close, right? So now what happens when organizations can use this type of technology in a more accessible manner, put out personalized content quickly that helps the person gain trust with that organization, helps with their capacity problems. The dark side is somebody puts out a real video that looks like a Secretary of State for a particular state and says the polls are closing in 2 hours. don't go vote? What do we do then? So, generative AI, what we think, and what I'm trying to show you, it's definitely going to unlock new ways of working, right? It's going to unlock creativity like we haven't seen before. Very slow and laborious tasks that, would take weeks to create content in Photoshop or, those types of creative tools are happening instantaneously with prompts. We'll be able to make more, informed decisions with better intelligence that can come from these large language models. And you'll be able to deliver highly personalized experiences. We'll be able to, and then create more content in shorter time frames to meet those demands. From an enhanced intelligence standpoint, 53% of marketers believe that GenAI will transform how they action data against campaign audience segments and develop these journeys to run with their customers. So what does that mean? You want to go on vacation, right? Normally it would take, I don't know, a few hours to a couple days to plan, how you want to visit Italy for 2 weeks, figure out the flights that's going to get you there and the lowest layover, then figure out which cities you want to go to, figure out the hotel, figure out, am I going to take the train, am I going to take a car, versus opening up maybe the Marriott app or the Hilton app and be like, hey, I want to come to Italy, I want to spend 10 days, can you help me plan an itinerary from if I leave from Tampa? That is how people are thinking about using this technology, getting an end-to-end experience, and then the organizations having the data to understand if they can fulfill that request and then tweak it. What that scenario I just described to you would normally take years to develop an engine or a system to be able to allow a travel company to do that. There's how many of you are familiar with human-centered design? So that's like a methodology, right, that, many companies are now adopting to use in order to develop and create prototypes, right, and then push it out into their markets and their customer segments. And, there's like defined methodology that goes behind that. You do a bunch of research, you can ideate, you design and prototype it, you then test it, and then you tweak it based on what's happening with that particular product. So, let's say that previous example I just gave you, right? With a Marriott or a Hilton or whatever, whatever travel company you want to think of that wants to build something like that, that takes time to develop something that in 2021. What we're saying now is, hey, you may not be comfortable deploying a generative AI solution to interact with your customers and there's no human involvement, which is a very fair concern. However, how do you use some of this technology today to accelerate the development of some of your experiences you want to develop for your customers so you can get to market faster, retain customers, and unlock value and generate revenue? And I hit up, some of this already, but how we look at it is, generative AI is going to affect every part of a business, but usually companies are there to serve their customers, right? So it's really going to just unlock new ways of working. Customers are going to now be addressed individually versus agnostically, right? Like you will soon be seeing content more tailored to you, to where you are, and meet you where you need to be with the right guardrails in place, hopefully, so that services are more relevant towards you. which will allow those organizations to have more actionable insights to tweak how they adjust their services. And then, those, personalized experiences will just be met towards their interests, right? And it's going to take a sampling of very vast public data as well as the data from those organizations. And, what we're going to see is just like, and this is just an example, we've done a bunch of survey in the world of marketing and video production, just for example. The time that's going to be created to create content or material is a multiple, right, in savings. It's going to be impactful, which will allow workforces to get more agile in terms of what they're going to go solve if the right things are automated. So I've talked, I think, a little bit about like a lot of the pros, the benefits, how we think the positive angles are going to be for this, but like there is a limitation, or a dark side, if you want to be blunt a little bit, on some of this technology today, right? There are malicious actors out there, so the foundation models are huge, which allows for security issues or vulnerabilities to be created, right? So how are enterprises going to navigate that? Those are real conversations these Fortune 500 companies are having, or top 2,000 companies are having. Generative AI, has the ability to generate large amounts of content, but is the content accurate? Is the content trustworthy? Is the content transparent? Like, how did it develop that content? That's that's the first thing I ask. How did it do that? Why did it know that, right? Like, those are things that enterprises need to think about if they want to deploy these things inside of their organizations. Generative AI can learn human experiences, nuances, but humans are imperfect. They have biases. How do you prevent those biases to be deployed into a model? Generative AI is adaptable, but if it's adaptable, how do you protect the IP? How do companies protect their data? How do companies protect their content? I don't know if you guys heard, OpenAI, launched a year ago. New York Times, J.R.R. Tolkien, several other authors are all suing OpenAI now because they use their content. Some of this stuff hasn't been figured out from a policy and a legal standpoint. It can be fine-tuned with little data, but it can produce answers or content very affirmatively, even when it doesn't know the answer. There's a new term now that I think the actual technical term for that is called a hallucination. The AI hallucinates and thinks it's providing an accurate answer. And then the ability to provide multimodal learning, right? Models can learn from text, video, images, whatever you feed it, but doesn't understand the nuances of human semantics and misinterprets it in a way, right? So how do you deal with that? It comes to governance. It comes to a technical approach that these enterprises need to take that has in our opinion, four different towers in terms of how to use these technologies, right? An organization needs to have principles and governance in place. It needs to uplift a responsible AI policy and create governance inside of an organization on when to use this technology for the right use cases, which, in our opinion, is not like any other type of governance that needs to be created for other things that an organization would be dealing with, right? So many of these organizations should have an infrastructure in place, and they just need to figure out how to fold in the AI topics into that governance. They need to think about risk policy and controls, which is unlike what many CIOs dealt with a cloud migration or their journey to the cloud. they have the foundation of those in place already. And then when you do use the technology, making sure you have the right enablers in place, right? It's very, our opinion, I guess is the right way of saying it, right now, is that when we sign up to help enable some of this technology for clients, we, as Accenture, talk about many things, but one of the things we talk about before we sign a contract with a client is that if we help you deploy a model, it needs to be transparent that the person using the model is using a model. There's risk around that, and that's a liability for us if we help that client deploy it unless the end user of that model didn't know that they were using it. That's a liability for us. And then we need to make sure, from an enabler standpoint, you have tools in place to help with data quality and accuracy, and making sure that there's a life cycle in place to making sure that somebody's reviewing how this content's being created. And then the last tower is, it comes down to culture and training and change management. 98%, like I said in the beginning, 98% of CEOs and leaders in organizations around the world believe that they know AI needs to be introduced into their organizations enterprise-wide in the next 3 to 5 years. But in order to do that, the workforce needs to be skilled in terms of how to use the technology responsibly so that the organization doesn't get exposed inadvertently. So that was the talk I had prepared, just to give you an overview on what we're seeing in the market and how we talk to clients. I wanted to open up the room to see if there's any questions that I can help address and your reactions. Happy to field any questions. Do you guys agree with this? Disagree? Somebody has to have an opinion.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. Appreciate it. I'm a physician working with Shan, so my question is, as a student or as a provider, how can we get involved in these kind of major improvements from our side? Where should we start with?
Yeah. So every organization is at a different journey, right? With how this technology is going to be used within their organization. If you're part of the workforce and you're not hearing about it, in terms of how it can be used or whether it should be used, I would, gently ask your leadership chain on what to do, right? Because what I would argue, and I don't know if people agree with me or disagree with me, the concept of work is at work and home is at home that's becoming a very blurred line these days, right? People are handling personal topics or issues at work, and vice versa when they're home. Work is on the mind; it's being used, and that translates into what does that mean from the assets that you have from your organization, whether it's a laptop or a phone, and you're using some of this technology. It can inadvertently, there's malicious actors out there, that data can be taken and used, right? So if you're not hearing about it, I would recommend, ask a question to the right person inside your organization. What I will tell you, based upon the information that I presented earlier, everyone is going to be using it in the future in some way, shape, or form. And if it's not at work, it's definitely going to be at home, right? I mean, think about like your Netflix experience, think about your Disney experience, think about, your cooking experience, think about your grocery shopping experience. Every facet of your life is going to be, you're going to be exposed to it, whether you want it or not. So, if you're not getting the right upskilling at work, be curious and, do your own research. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. Based on your consulting experience, what steps do you think the government should take to ensure protection of privacy, fair competition, and to promote innovation within the AI realm?
I'm not laughing because I think that's the $1 million question, honestly, right? My personal opinion, only not on behalf of Accenture, right? Because that's a different ballgame. But I think there needs to be some sort of regulation, right? I don't know what it is. We are seeing states beginning to regulate. Governor Abbott in Texas legislated, 9 months ago, an AI council. So literally, there's a body now that is looking at how government agencies within the state of Texas are going to use the technology in a professional manner to make sure that the data of their citizens is not fed to these models without the right controls in place. So that AI council is going to create the policies and recommend the legislation to the governor, all that kind of stuff. The state of Maine, for example, the CISO, which is the chief security officer for the entire state, told every single employee to stop using the technology on their work devices until the state puts out an official policy on how to use it. The city of San Jose has already released their policy. So the city is okay with the technology being used under specific principles and guide rails. So I think there's going to be, in some way, shape, or form, and one thing I should have said, the federal government is already, considering how to legislate it, on how to use it, and privacy and security is the first topic that they're concerned about, that people's data is not, you talk to ChatGPT today, they own that conversation, whatever you say. So if you were to put your name, your address, you live in, Gainesville, for example, and you say, I have a bank account with whatever bank you bank at, and, tell me the closest ATM. You've exposed 4 or 5 data points about yourself to that model, and that model knows it forever. So I think there's going to be something that happens around that. I don't know what it is. I think there's a lot of leaders, especially, you hear the Elon Musk conversations, you hear like the Mark Zuckerberg conversations. Governments are talking to those guys and their teams to figure out what the right way it is. I would not be surprised if there's like a AI Bill of Rights that comes out, to be honest. That's how I feel, but that's my personal opinion, not on behalf of anyone else. Yep. Anyone else?
I suppose professionally, what is your approach to implementing AI, or do you see a new technology and then say, okay, how do we use this, or do you see how it aligns? Do you focus on the problems of your company and see how it works with that?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So we're seeing a couple different flavors on how clients are asking on how to use this technology. One is you have the client that is worried about the security and the privacy aspect of it. We are actively talking to clients on how they create training curriculum with the client's policies and security considerations, and helping them build essentially ethics and compliance training to deploy to their workforce, right? So they don't have the subject matter expertise, but they have the expertise about their organization, and we're helping them develop that. You have organizations or leaders that say, hey, I get this, I understand it, I understand the value of it, I want to do a proof of concept. I have this problem, I think this is going to help with this problem. We will then structure a team to do a couple month assessment to identify the problem, build that prototype, and help them understand it in their controlled environment, right? So we're seeing a flavor of that. we're also seeing a flavor of clients saying, before we get started, we need to have the right governance in play. So we'll help stand up the right stakeholders and making sure that there's governance and making sure that they're talking to the right ecosystem partners and making sure that they're, doing it in a secured and controlled manner. So this is a long-winded answer, but in short is we meet the client where they are, right? And where we structure whatever they want to do in the right way based upon their needs. Every organization is different, so there's no pushed playbook. What we do is, talks like this, right, where we provide a market briefing, help them understand what the capabilities are, do demonstrations, be their, partner when it comes to some of this stuff, right, so that they understand that when they are ready to act, they can call upon us to help.
And how do you personally or your team learn more about the topics or stay up to date or learn more information?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a couple things. One is our firm has decided that this is one of the things that is going to be the future. So they've invested heavily in, they developed training for us. They've developed, central hubs where we can collect information. But what I do personally is, if you go to LinkedIn, there's a lot of content on emerging technologies. There's several blogs out there, several speakers that are very knowledgeable in the area. I follow those folks, and then most tech-based or cloud-based or these bigger ecosystem providers are pushing out content now, right, on how they're making features available, and you can subscribe to their content and get flashes. And honestly, I just subscribe to a bunch of stuff, and I spend 15 minutes a day reading through it.
Hey, I was just going to ask, are you aware of any kind of one-way generative AI platforms where you aren't putting those 4 or 5 data points of your personal information in and not essentially training the model? Because I've heard possibly that companies are kind of exploring those kinds of avenues where they could use something like that instead for security purposes.
So one-way model is a new term for me. I haven't heard that. But what we are helping clients understand or do is that if you think about the last decade, there was a digital revolution that occurred, and then there was a cloud revolution that occurred. Most of these organizations are in the cloud now. They've spent a lot of time putting together the right security controls in place, standing up their environments. They're pretty locked down. And if an enterprise is ready to use it, they can take an instance of that model, deployed inside their cloud, and it never leaves that fence, right? So when that happens, and that's where companies like Accenture or others, we can help them deploy it in that secure manner, so that whenever they do create use cases within their enterprise, whether it's for the workforce, for the back office, or for their customers, it can be configured, utilized, trained with the right data parameters to making sure that when someone does say something, that data is not logged, or when it does receive a prompt, you can I don't want to say delete, but put a fence around the content it's allowed to respond to, right? So that is how we're talking to clients on how to deploy some of this. But one directional is new to me. That's a new concept. I'm going to look that up if that's a new term. That's awesome. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
So there is some new research into personality assessment by models like ChatGPT. And the research suggests that there is almost 0.8 correlation between ChatGPT's assessment and assessment by experts from psychology. So how do you think the industry is going to respond to something like this, where maybe these models are getting implemented or getting included in the recruitment process, and where essentially the future of an applicant is placed into an AI model's hands?
Yeah. Models are going to be used, right? And I think what is important to understand is our belief is that an organization should be using it responsibly, right? And if an organization is not, I think it's up to you as the human to decide whether or not to interact with it, right? And I think that's some of the stuff we're going to see in terms of policies that come out, with whether it's governments or organizations or who you work for. I don't know if I have a straight answer on, I agree with, there are things that are going to happen with AI models that will replace some of the tasks that human can do. I think the opportunity to that is if you talk to, directors or CEOs or, COOs or whatever it have may be, how do you use the models to move the easy work through the models, but deploy the humans to handle the hard work, right? I think you're going to see more of that, but it's going to be up to each organization to figure that out, right? In terms of how they do that responsibly.
Right. So as a consultancy firm, what would your suggestions be to an organization that wants to implement this and probably just replace the human aspect of it?
We wouldn't recommend that.
Oh, wow.
What we would recommend is use it, but augment.
Thank you for your talk. It was really interesting.
Yep.
My question is really about your opinion from a business perspective. Do you feel like the landscape right now in most companies is that most companies have already implemented AI in some way, or most companies are interested but not yet implementing AI, or companies are kind of skeptical and not wanting to implement AI? What do you think is the...
AI in general or generative AI?
Generative AI.
I think most companies are thinking about it. I think we're seeing a lot of companies trying to use it. We're investing $3 billion into generative AI, making sure our workforce is skilled and can be able to practice it and be able to help our clients move to it, is because we believe that everyone is going to be using it in some way, shape, or form. If you talk about AI in general, I think you'd be surprised on how many organizations are already using AI, right? RPA is considered AI, right? Traditional chatbots and natural language processors, right? Those of the Amazons of the world have been using it for years. So I think the shift is now how generative AI is actually going to unlock additional value with all these organizations. And, our perspective is we think it's the future.
I see. And adding to that, just out of curiosity, have you seen with the companies you've worked with so far any impacts after the implementation, such as, maybe layoffs or changing the overall structure of how work is performed in that company?
It's too early to make those claims, in my opinion.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Yep. How are you guys using generative AI today? I'd be curious to understand that. Besides, I'm sure you guys are using a little bit on homework, but I'd be curious to understand if there's any other use cases that are being used within your day-to-day lives.
I use it to help study for tests.
How do you do that?
If there's like terms I don't get, or if there's like a math problem that's, after putting in some effort, I just can't figure out how to use AI to give me hints and stuff.
So like an automated TA.
Yeah, just basically using it as an automated TA.
That's awesome. Anyone else?
And one case that I use AI for that I think is pretty interesting, and I think you like brought it up briefly, is like vocal synthesis, but also just audio stuff in general. Like what I'm working on right now is training an AI to get like audio as an input, specifically music, and asking how I could properly like EQ balance things so that it sounds better. So,
And
like
when you prompt it, does it give you the right recommendation? Or close?
I think it sounds a little better.
Not as much as you would hope.
It requires like a tuned ear that I don't have in particular.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure in collaboration with like other audio engineers, like could get something working like that.
Have you ever asked, like I've heard about people like say write a poem or write a song, but have you asked a model to like produce a melody or something? I'm just curious.
Not melodies or poems. Personally, I don't think they're up to par on that.
Fair enough.
But there are opportunities there to like use AI to improve the more nuanced details of things artistically, I think.
Very cool.
And that's what I do it for.
Cool. I think she had a use case too.
So yeah, I have a couple of use cases. One, there are certain programs that are available. I am a GCAP, which is a graduate mentor. So we have internally at UF several programs like VMark, which goes over students' resumes and optimizes it. And then we have like mock interviews. So before even going into an actual interview, you can do a mock interview.
Awesome.
But as personally, at a personal level, I use it a lot for content creation. So whenever I'm writing something, I can kind of feed it into giving it a right prompt to condense my material, to make it more logically organized. And also, I'll be graduating December. So as a student, when I'm looking for job opportunities or when I'm trying to look at a job description and I want to know what kind of skills somebody's looking for, I can just feed it into the AI software that I'm using and kind of ask it what kind of skills are required, and then kind of tailor my pitch, kind of tailor my application according to that. So there are several ways, depends upon what your need is at that point in time. So these are some of the ways that I'm using it.
Awesome. Very cool. Are there any other questions?
There's one in the back.
Hey, I have another use case on how I use mine.
Sure.
I'm a programmer, so I do a lot of coding, and I use it for making certain methods. It's not always perfect. It doesn't normally fit very well in with my code, but it normally has the right thinking process and kind of allows me to integrate some of that AI code and solve problems that may take a while for me to solve myself. It's also good for a debugging perspective. You just copy and paste your code in there, and it can find like issues and things that are hard to spot with the human eye.
That's awesome.
And a lot of IDEs are starting to integrate it more now with things like Copilot and Copilot X. So
very cool.
It's definitely very helpful in the development standpoint.
You mean GitHub Copilot or?
Yeah, GitHub Copilot.
Awesome. That's very cool.
Yeah.
By the way, GitHub Copilot, we're trying to train like 50,000 people to use that. So that's a good skill to have.
I have a similar use case. I use, first of all, I pay for ChatGPT 4. It works a lot, I think, like rather than 3.5. And I'm a PhD student and TA at the same time. And I generally use for like evaluate my essays and assignments. And also, I'm pretty sure that my students also use for ChatGPT for their assignments, because sometimes they forgot these brackets, like write your name in here. I was like, no way, I know you're using ChatGPT. Like, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta still read what you're submitting.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I think that might be the last one due to time.
I will just say that I participated in the hackathon that happened here this last weekend, and kind of on Monday as well too. And this is sponsored by Verizon, and they wanted to use generative AI to help improve the user experience, and that could be a really broad range of things. A lot of people came up with chatbots. They wanted educational opportunities as well. But my team actually got third because we developed this thing. We called it Chat GIT, and it was almost like a text to code thing within the terminal or command prompt itself to help users. Because I'm not very good with the command prompts, and it would help someone like me where something like that is very case sensitive and very prone to errors. And we were able to get it functioning to more or less an extent using the ChatGPT API.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I want to thank everyone for their time. Appreciate you bearing with me while I'm on a soapbox. So it's always fun to hear what you guys are thinking through, and very encouraged to see the enthusiasm around this topic here on the campus. So congrats to all of you for making this a priority. Thank you.
And hang out, network, and then we'll be back, I believe, later today.